8 runs scored, 3 home runs hit, and some incredible plays defensively. Are the New York Mets just unbeatable at Citi Field this year? We'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Tuesday was just an awesome all-around game for the New York Mets. Once again, playing at home in front of a sold-out or at least packed crowd at Citi Field for Walking Dead night. You saw some star-studded fans in the building with Tom Hanks and John Mayer and others that were checking out the hottest ticket in town, as the New York Mets have gotten off to an incredible start this season, where they were the first team in Major League Baseball to 20 wins. But more importantly, they've been nearly unbeatable at Citi Field, 12-1 going into tonight's game. And man, was it a fun one. In the second inning, the Mets jumped all over Eduardo Rodriguez. Started off at the bottom of the lineup. Luisangel Acuna gets a one-out single. Francisco Alvarez pops out. And then Tyrone Taylor, with 2 outs, rips a double down the left field line. Incredible base running for Acuna. Just see him fly around the bases. So much fun to watch him just run around and show off that athleticism. He scores there. Jose Azocar then gets a base hit to drive in Tyrone Taylor. You got to give Jose Azocar some credit. He's giving the Mets some good at-bats. I mean, I didn't love the move when the Mets decided to keep him instead of Brett Beatty, but so far so good for Azocar. And then that sets up Francisco Lindor to get another chance, and he comes through in a big way, hits a 2-run homer. Just like that, the Mets are winning 4-0 through the first 2 innings. The third inning, the Mets piled on 3 more runs. Pete Alonso drew a leadoff walk. Then Starling Marte hit his second home run of the season to put the Mets up by a score of 6-0. Luisangel Acuna got another hit, stole a base, and then scored again on a hit by Tyrone Taylor. This one a single. The Mets were up 7-0. Crowds buzzing, just a lot of fun. And then the fans get an unbelievable treat, which is watching the Mets play defense in the bottom of the 4th inning. Just a wild series of plays. The first one, a hot shot to third base. Mark Vientos goes full extension to dive, and he keeps it in the infield, but he doesn't field it cleanly. It ricochets off his glove and falls right into Francisco Lindor's breadbasket. He makes the catch, throw to first base, makes it look routine. Incredible, 5-6-3 put out. Just an awesome play by the Mets. And then the next one was even better. Tyrone Taylor goes full extension, makes one of the best diving catches you're ever going to see. And the funny thing about that catch, and I had a listener that reached out to me about this because I guess they had the thought as well. I had been talking about the perfect lineup combination for the Mets on yesterday's show. And I was discussing having Jeff McNeil in center field. And what I was talking about was how Jeff McNeil is not going to hurt you in center field. And I said that he's going to give you better at-bats than Tyrone Taylor. Taylor definitely had some good at-bats in the game today. But when it comes to the defense, I specifically described the plays that Jeff McNeil can and can't make. I said, when it comes to, fielding balls in the gap and, cutting them off and stopping guys from getting extra base hits or getting triples, that's something he can do. When it comes to catching the fly balls that he can get to, he's not going to make mistakes. Jeff McNeil is not going to hurt you in center field. But what I said was, he's also not going to help you in the way that Tyrone Taylor could. I said that Jeff McNeil is not going to make the catch where he's starting in right center field and he ends up in left center field and he makes an incredible play. And we see Tyrone Taylor make that exact catch. Remarkable to see the ground that he covered to, again, go from right center field, end up in left center field right in front of the warning track and make a diving catch that took him into the warning track. Just an unbelievable play. And if that wasn't enough, Francisco Lindor fields a ball that came off the bat at about 112 miles per hour on a one-hand backhanded play, a one-hop backhanded stop, fires the runner out at first base. Just an insane set of 3 plays. I can't remember 3 consecutive plays like that was just a mind-boggling play after another one. So it was a crazy inning for the Mets. David Peterson loved the help. He had a really good start overall. He did get hit a little bit hard, but he was just attacking the zone with the big lead. He goes 5 innings, gives up 5 hits, strikes out 2, no walks, and doesn't give up anything. So solid start from him. The Mets tacked on an 8th run in the bottom of the 4th inning when Pete Alonso demolished his 7th home run of the season. Pete had a great game, 2 for 3 with a walk. Also made 3 diving plays himself over at first base. So he showed off the leather as well today. Just all around, great team baseball. Good at-bats from the team top to bottom. Incredible defense, and the pitching was really solid. And I also love the managing in this game because Carlos Mendoza, I don't know, maybe he's listened to the show or maybe somebody pointed it out to him, but I have been complaining recently about the use of Jose Butto, having him come out and pitch in situations where there's runners on base when he has shown consistently that he is not good in those spots. So far this year, as I mentioned on, must have been Monday's show after the blow up on Sunday, he had only stranded 2 out of 7 inherited runners. So 5 had come into the score. And when he pitches with a clean inning going into today, it was 8 innings pitched, 3 walks, 4 hits, 1 earned run. Outings where he came in with traffic, 7 innings pitched, 12 hits, 4 walks, 6 earned runs. So an ERA of 7.71 when he comes in with traffic on the bases. And that's not even counting the 5 inherited runners that have come around to score. So it's pretty obvious that you shouldn't be pitching him in those spots. And I think you saw Carlos Mendoza recognize that with the way he used Butto on this one, because obviously he gave him a clean inning, but also he could have thrown David Peterson back out there. Peterson was at 85 pitches. He could have tried to steal an out or 2 from Peterson just because this bullpen has been so taxed, and they're finally trying to get these guys some rest so that they can get through the rest of this stretch here where there's still not an off day until, I believe, next Thursday. So not this week, the following one. So this is definitely a tough stretch for the Mets, and I think Mendoza in the past has been tempted to try to steal those outs with the starting pitcher, and it hasn't been working. So he maybe learned his lesson on that. He throws Butto out there with a clean inning. What does Butto do? A 1-2-3 frame with 2 strikeouts, goes out for a second inning, works around a 1-out walk, picks up 2 more strikeouts, puts up another 0. So now it's 10 innings pitched with clean innings, where he has a sub-1 ERA, where he's only given up 1 run when he comes into a clean inning. So that is the way to use Jose Butto moving forward. And with that, you might finally get a guy that can be a big boost to this bullpen instead of someone that becomes a detriment every time they put him out there with a runner on base. After Butto, Kevin Herget made the most of his one-day cameo on the Mets roster, gave them 2 innings to close out the game, did give up a couple of runs, only one of them earned as Mark Vientos made a throwing error, but he saved the bullpen, which could be very key going into the next game here, as the Mets will have to square off against Corbin Burns with Brandon Waddell. I want to talk about game 2 of this series in just a minute. What is the Mets' strategy to win this one? They're going to have to get creative. How can they do it? I'll go through it in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now tonight, the Mets will be squaring off against Corbin Burns, and they will be countering with Brandon Waddell. So not necessarily an advantage for the New York Mets, but who is Brandon Waddell? Now, he is a 30-year-old left-handed starting pitcher who has actually spent the last couple of years in the KBO. He pitched for the Doosan Bears, had a 2.49 ERA in 2023 across 18 starts and 104 and two-third innings pitched. He also pitched in, what is this? The CPBL, the Chinese Professional Baseball League, for 12 starts that year. So you put it all together, it was 175 and two-third innings at a 2.82 ERA. Last year, he was back with Doosan, made 14 starts, crossed 75 innings. He pitched to a 3.12 ERA. So a lot of success overseas, comes back now. And in Syracuse this season, he made 5 starts. He pitched to a 1.54 ERA and 23 and a third innings pitched. We saw David Peterson have some success against this Diamondbacks team. They are much better facing right-handed pitching than left. So that's why the Mets thought Waddell would be the ideal guy to make the spot start. Also, he is the guy that's been throwing the best in Syracuse to start this season. So it'll be interesting to see what Waddell does with this opportunity. He might not start the game. The last time the Mets had a similar situation where Justin Hagenman came up to make the spot start, they went with an opener, and Hagenman got, I believe it was 10 outs. They started with Brazoban, and then it really was a bullpen game. So this is going to be another bullpen game of sorts. We'll see if Waddell can get more than 10 outs. I think that is perfectly acceptable if you get even just that. If you could potentially get 4 innings out of him or 5 innings, that would be incredible. I imagine if they go with an opener, they might go right back to the well with who they had open the game where Hagenman pitched, and that was Huascar Brazoban. So maybe Brazoban opens things up. If you look at the lineup that the Diamondbacks had in the game today, there's some lefties atop the lineup, but then you do get into a little bit of a righty section. So could Brazoban get the first 5 outs of the game if this was the most optimal thing? I think that might be what would happen, where you look at the Diamondbacks lineup. Let's just say they're all at the same one. You had Geraldo Perdomo, Corbin Carroll, then you get to a Randall Grichuk, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and Eugenio Suarez middle part of their lineup, where you got nothing but right-handed batters in there. So maybe that is the first 5 batters that you have Brazoban sort of set to face. Granted, you have Gabby Moreno, also a right-handed batter, who was batting 6th in that lineup before you get to Pavin Smith. So we'll see if they run out the same lineup for the Diamondbacks, but I would look out for maybe Brazoban to be the opener again, see if you can get an inning or 2 out of him. Then you go to Waddell to face the middle to bottom of that Diamondbacks lineup and see how many innings you can steal out of him. And the good thing is, because of the way the Mets have been able to go about the last couple of games with the blowouts, having Jose Urena and Kevin Herget, guys that have just basically spent a day on the roster, who combined pitched 5 innings across the last 2 games. The only guy that's pitched out of the Mets bullpen in the 2 blowouts is Max Kranick, who gave you just 1 inning. So he got a day off. Everybody else is at least 2 days off. So this bullpen is rested and ready for this opportunity to cover or ready for this challenge of covering potentially a lot of real estate in this game. And then you got Kodai Senga going to hopefully give you length in the final game of this series to sort of reset things again after a pseudo bullpen game. So we'll see what Waddell does with the opportunity. If he pitches really well, the Mets could keep him around and have him make a spot start against the Diamondbacks again next week. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next segment, as there is some AJ Minter news to discuss. And I think that'll also play into the conversation of how the Mets are managing their rotation, because if you can avoid having a 6th starter in that rotation, you can have a deeper bullpen to account for the loss of Minter. But again, we'll get to that in the final segment today. Getting back to this game 2 of the series, the Mets are going to have to do something against Corbin Burns, and Burns has been hittable this year. He started off with a 4.05 ERA through his first 5 starts in a Diamondbacks uniform. He's given up a home run in 3 of those 5 starts. So he could leave some pitches over the heart of the plate, and the Mets all of a sudden have really grown fond of the home run ball. So we'll see if you can see some more fireworks at Citi Field on Wednesday night against Corbin Burns. That would be an amazing thing for them to get some runs early, because that Diamondbacks bullpen can be pretty nasty at the back end if you are trailing. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Mets keep the D-backs off the board with, again, an unproven pitcher in Waddell, and then just a bullpen game. And you won't have Jose Butto available after the 2 innings that he threw. So You got Brazabon, who can give you multiple innings. We'll see if Kranick can give you multiple innings on only 1 day's rest, but he didn't really have too strenuous of an inning on Monday, so we'll see. And then you obviously have Reed Garrett very rested and able, if there's a big spot, to maybe pitch you out of a jam and then get an inning after that potentially. So that's where the Mets are with their pitching in this one, and they're going up against a guy in Burns that can be very tough, but there's a lot of guys in this lineup that have had success against Corbin Burns. Pete Alonso, 6 for 15 lifetime against Burns with a double and 3 home runs, batting average of 400, a slugging percentage over 1,000. Francisco Lindor, 6 for 18 with 2 doubles and a triple. At the same time, he has 8 strikeouts against Corbin Burns. So either he sees them or he doesn't, I guess. And then you have Brandon Nimmo, who is 6 for 16 with a double and 2 triples. Juan Soto's 2 for 5. So not a ton of exposure there. But Nimmo, I'll be curious to see if he's in the lineup. He was not in the lineup on Tuesday as he was dealing with flu-like symptoms. I guess he was actually under the weather, apparently, for that incredible game he had on Monday, but too sick to get out there on Tuesday. Also, he had a lefty on the mound, so you wonder if that played into the decision a little bit as well. We'll see if Nimmo's good to go against Corbin Burns. Hopefully he is, based on the track record, and hopefully he can carry over some of his success from Monday into this game. If he is able to play, I'd imagine that Jeff McNeil probably starts at either second base or center field. If Nimmo's not good to go, I think McNeil starts in left, and they just keep everything else the same from what we saw in this one. Well, actually, Winker would be in there for Marte. So Winker in for Marte, McNeil in for Azekar, everything else the same. If Nimmo is good to go, I imagine you see Jeff McNeil at either second base with Tyrone Taylor in center, or Acuna at second base, and McNeil right back in center field for that lineup that did so well on Sunday. But this will be a fun game to see if the Mets can beat up on a really good pitcher who has not gotten off to the best of starts this year. If they can and they win this game, well, for one, they've won the series early, but also with Kodai Senga on the mound on Thursday, you have a really good chance to get a sweep if you get that far. And even if you lose this one, Senga's the guy you want on the mound to try to win this series. So the Mets are sitting pretty after taking the first game of this 3-game set. They're now 13-1 at home. A couple more chances to pad that record before they hit the road for, I believe it is a 6-game road trip, where they will go to St. Louis and then Arizona, where they will face off against the Diamondbacks once again before finally getting an off day next Thursday. What I want to talk about in the final segment here is how the Mets will manage this upcoming stretch between the news on AJ Minter and how the Mets can get around needing a 6th starter for most of May. We'll go through all that in the next segment. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by my favorite snack, Wonderful Pistachios. You're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious. Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios, one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you feel fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells varieties of Wonderful Pistachios. This is a new flavor, or at least a new flavor to me, that I had not tried until this week, and that is salt and pepper. I love the honey roasted. I love the smoky barbecue. Now I love the salt and pepper. I really haven't tried a bad flavor of Wonderful Pistachios yet. They're all amazing. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. So get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. If you are an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks in the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and you get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, the New York Mets got some bad news on AJ Minter. It appears like he could be done for the season with that lat injury. Right now, the Mets are trying to decide if he is going to get surgery or he's going to go with the rest and rehab approach. If he does go with the rest and rehab approach, there is a chance that he can come back by the end of the season. But for his health long-term and his career, the best course of action might be some type of a surgery, and that would be season-ending surgery. So this is a huge blow to the Mets bullpen. We knew it was going to be a pretty good amount of time. But now you're starting to look at the possibility or potentially the probability of AJ Minter not making an impact for the rest of the season, which does hurt that bullpen in a pretty big way. The good news, Brooks Raley could be the replacement. He's already throwing bullpens, but I still don't think the expectation is he'd be back until June at the earliest. Still could be a huge difference maker, particularly when the games really matter in the second half, but you might still be a little bit away from that. He's going to, continue throwing in Florida, and then eventually he'll start a rehab assignment, but we aren't even at that point yet. So Raley is not going to be the short-term answer. So in the meantime, Danny Young's your only lefty in the bullpen, but more importantly, you're down a man when it comes to your 7th and 8th innings, your setup men. You have Reed Garrett, you have Ryan Stanek, and then you're going to have Huascar Braziban and Max Kranick pitching and leverage more and more frequently as they have been outstanding for the Mets this year. But that then takes away from your long men. So the Mets are in a tricky spot, and we have talked about the possibility of Daniel Nunez being the answer, being an 8th inning guy potential for the Mets. We saw how good Nunez can be last year. When he's right, he might have the best stuff in this bullpen. But the Mets have been very cautious with him because he had the flexor strain and they wanted to make sure he was okay. They basically put him in extended spring training by having him go in Syracuse, and they were really monitoring his workload. He hasn't pitched since April 25th. Neither has Tyler Zuber. There was a doubleheader over the weekend that neither of them got into, which I think is a testament to the fact that they are sort of on the reserve list to come up and potentially make an impact on this big league roster at some point soon. Both of those guys are on the 40. And so now you got to see how the Mets manage this thing. I think the obvious thing that's going to happen is after Waddell pitches, there's a very good chance the Mets will look to grab another fresh arm for the bullpen for the final game of this series against the Diamondbacks, and then to go on the road. I think that could be Tyler Zuber, and the only reason why I say that, the Mets are going to need a spot starter again next week against the Diamondbacks. So unless they stick with Waddell because he looks so good against the Diamondbacks that they want to hold on to him on the roster for a week and basically not have him pitch and just go a man down in the bullpen, they'll have a Zuber, on the road trip for the first part of it. And then once you need that spot starter, which would be, so Coda, it would be next Tuesday. Once you need that spot starter, you would have to send a Zuber down and call somebody else up. I don't know if that would be Hagenman again, potentially. He's the only other guy on the roster. Theoretically, Brandon Sproat, but I don't think the Mets are going to make that move. Or you go with a bullpen game. But regardless, once you get through that game, then you can call Daniel Nunez up and not have to worry about needing his spot on the roster for a 6th starter. Because here's the situation the Mets are in right now. Max Kranick and Huascar Braziban have the ability to be optioned, but they are too integral to this bullpen to do so. Jose Butto and Danny Young would have to be DFA. They cannot be optioned down. So your only flexible roster spot is the one we've seen where you saw Jose Urena taking a spot in that bullpen. Then you saw Kevin Herget. Now you're going to see Waddell. You might see Zuber. And once you get through that second spot start, the Mets are going to have their off day on Thursday every single week throughout the rest of the month of May. So what that means with Kodai Senga set to start again on Thursday this week and then Wednesday next week before the off day, he will be able to get the extra day rest every single week in the month of May. So you could just, for Paul Blackburn, he's not going to be ready to make that spot start. I think he's through at Citi Field, and now he's going to throw a bullpen on Tuesday and then maybe jump back into his rehab process. He threw 2 innings in Brooklyn. I think it was on April 19th. Then he got sick and wasn't able to pitch for a little bit. So what I would think would happen at that point is you slow play Paul Blackburn's rehab, build him all the way up, get him up to 100 pitches if you want to, honestly. Stick with 8 guys in the bullpen. If this rotation keeps pitching the way it has, don't, try to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Just keep those 5 guys rolling. Because of the off days, you can do it where you will not need a spot starter until Friday, June 6th. At that point, Frankie Montas could be ready, or it could be Blackburn, probably not Sean Manaea. But this gives you a full month to really lean into an 8-man bullpen, find out some things, keep that 5-man rotation you've had that's worked this year rolling, and then make some decisions later. Or obviously, if injuries or lack of performance, spark some decision making, then yeah, you roll with the punches as your season rolls on. But I really think what we could see is the Mets go with Tyler Zuber, who's the guy they got in the trade at the trade deadline last year from the Rays. He has a crazy sweeper. That's really all I know about him. Hasn't pitched too well in Syracuse, but he's on the 40. So they can have Zuber at Citi Field for the game on Thursday against the Diamondbacks, then in St. Louis, and there for the first game of the following series against the Diamondbacks. They go to a spot starter. Maybe it's Hagenman. If you had Billy Upper around, you would just have Tyler Zuber hurt and go on the IL for the phantom injury, and then you'd bring in Waddell again. But regardless, you'd have somebody come up to make that spot start. Then you go to Daniel Nunez, and you can have Nunez in the bullpen throughout the entire month of May, where your 8-man bullpen is Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, Daniel Nunez, and Ryan Stanek as your high-leverage late-inning guys. You can continue with the triumvirate of Kranick, Brazaban, and Butto as your multi-inning Swiss Army men. And then you have Danny Young as your left-handed reliever. And you can stick with that 8-man bullpen throughout the month of May, stick with the same 5-man rotation that's gotten you to this point. And then in June, when you might need to get those 6-starter or the spot starts back in there, you could potentially go to that traditional, not the traditional, but the 6-man rotation that we thought the Mets were going to be in all season. You might finally get to that in June when you had the arms to really warrant it. When a Montas or a Manaea is ready, then you start making some tough decisions with that rotation as well as the bullpen. But in the meantime, I think the door is wide open for Daniel Nunez to make an impact. He hasn't looked great in Syracuse this year, but as I said on the show a couple days ago, I still believe that if you get Daniel Nunez back in the big leagues, he's a healthy arm right now. I think you get him back in the big leagues with the adrenaline that comes with it. I think Nunez will go right back to being the guy we saw last year. And I think you should at least see if he can be that guy again, because that is a difference maker in that bullpen. And you need difference makers in that bullpen with AJ Minter, a incredible anchor for that bullpen. I felt so good with AJ Minter as the guy that was just going to go out there and be competitive every single time. Now you lose that. Now you lose that veteran experience in those high leverage opportunities. You still have Stanek, but he can be up and down. To me, getting that high octane young arm that can just come up and make a big impact like Nunez did last year, I think that's where the Mets have to get to at some point. But it might make sense to go with Zuber for the next week, just because if not, if you have to grab that spot starter, you'd either have to send down Brazaban, Nunez, or Kranick and keep them down for 15 days unless there was an injury. So that's where the Mets are at right now with their pitching. I think it's a tough stretch here to just get to that next off day, get through these 2 spot starts, and then you're going to have off days all of May where everything can settle down a little bit, the same way we saw for the first 3 weeks of the season when the Mets had those off days. And I think they'll be able to navigate things pretty well, where they're not going to be feeling some of those big losses to their pitching staff, Minter, Montas, Manaea. When you have those off days and are able to navigate things and not worry about those spot starts and not worry about pitching with a man down in the bullpen because you're in a 6-man rotation, I think you'll still see the best version of this Mets pitching staff. And then you'll get the reinforcements where you could get those guys back. Raley could be an impact arm in June or July. I think the Mets are well positioned to weather this storm, especially with what's happened the last 2 days with the bullpen getting so much rest. It's been massive to have those blowout victories. Huge for the offense to really pick up the pitching staff in a major way for the first time this season. We'll see if that continues and how they get through this spot start from Brandon Waddell, or the opener to the bulk arm of Waddell against a former Cy Young winner. And if they can win this one, the Mets really might be unstoppable at Citi Field. On tomorrow's show, I'll be breaking down whatever we see, and I'll be previewing what lies ahead while always keeping an eye on the Mets farm system. As always, thank you all for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.